you want to look at specifically, which is what I do with Kylie. It's
Yeah,
super helpful.
shout out to Kylie at Fly Nutrition. She's the best in the business. So we really wanted to have like a two-part conversation. The first of which is essential tips for injury prevention, because it's really not really worth talking about how to train specifically for a 100 miler unless it's really built on a foundation of making sure that you are healthy, because good training, particularly high level training for a longer race, requires health and consistency, which really go hand in hand. So my first tip for injury prevention is run consistently. A lot of times I'll see injuries pop up when athletes want to take an off season, or, they go to the Bahamas for 2 weeks and so they don't run the whole time they're there, and then they come back and they try to jump right into the exact same volume they were doing beforehand, and their tendons aren't ready, their soft tissue isn't ready, and you have to sort of ramp back up after time off. So one of the best ways to prevent injury is to run consistently and really try to avoid peaks and valleys in your training. You don't want to increase volume dramatically week to week, although the 10% rule in running, the rule that you shouldn't increase your weekly volume by more than 10% week to week, is actually a myth. Studies show that ramp rate is one of the biggest factors in determining a runner's injury risk, but more experienced runners can tolerate more than a 10% increase per week. For instance, frequently we'll go from 60 miles a week to 85 or 90.
I did a 33-mile week last 2 weeks ago, and then I did an 80-mile week.
Right. Yeah. And
so
as you get more advanced, and if you're healthy, you actually are able to tolerate more a pretty big shifts. And it's more about deviation from the baseline.
Right. Yeah, it's totally true. And I think, again, what also helps to support this is I love this idea of prehab rather than rehab.
Yes.
And so, I'm thinking about the proper strength in mobility, having intentional stuff that's done to prevent injury from occurring, learning where your weaknesses are, and then making sure that you're addressing them consistently. We have tons of athletes that are doing my PT, I'm doing my PT. And some athletes are doing that in response to an injury. And some athletes are doing that regularly because they've discovered through injury in the past an area of weakness that they need to work on.
Or imbalance.
Or an imbalance. And so they stick with that and they continue to increase and try to make gains there. That kind of prehab is really, really important. I like to see athletes who are healthy still doing PT.
Right. Yeah, and that's so true. And I'd love to know what your go-tos for strength and mobility are, but a big part of my routine is the 2-minute banded monster walk. So using a resistance band and doing lateral work, that's so helpful for stabilizing the hips, stabilizing the pelvis, and and that's a big thing that's been really helpful for, I have a tilty pelvis, and it's also really cured my IT band syndrome. So if your knees hurt while running, I really recommend doing the banded monster walks.
Mm-hmm. Monster walks are great.
What's an essential part of your prehab? You do a lot of eccentric heel drops.
I do a lot of eccentric heel drops, especially around this time of year when that vert is increasing a lot.
When that Achilles starts to shout.
No, I had Achilles issues coming off of Leadville. And so I started really to try to focus in on strengthening the soleus muscle in the calf, and also the Achilles, ankle mobility, just working on those areas to keep the lower legs healthy. That's a regular part of my routine. Obviously, monster walks I think are super, super helpful. I like clamshells too.
Love clamshells.
And do a ton
glute
of
bridges.
Glute bridges.
Love
I do
glute
those
bridges.
At least 3 or 4 times a week. Single leg, double leg, planks are huge too. I keep it pretty freaking simple because I think
and you do predominantly body weight.
Yeah, I don't do much weight. I do a lot with the band. I like side-lying hip extenders.
Yeah.
To kind of work on the glute med, and also kind of the insertion point where your IT band comes in to the glute. That's an area where I have noticed some imbalance between the right and the left leg. So I'm consistently working on that stuff, and it's not like I have an injury. This is just because I've had issues there before.
Right.
I figured out what I need to do to stay on top of it, and then I make sure that I get that stuff done.
Right, like everyone's biomechanics are really different. I have a leg length discrepancy and scoliosis because I have an extra rib on my left side. So like my skeleton just looks like a fucking Guillermo del Toro monster. Like my X-rays are gnarly. It's a miracle I can run, truly. So being able to counter, again, the fact that like maybe on paper, not many of us are perfectly symmetrical. So you need to figure out where to work, ideally with a professional, a PT or a strength coach who can functionally like help diagnose and address where you might have imbalances or areas of weakness. But I think having a robust program that targets your specific issues is the best way to go with that.
Yeah.
And this next point is so important that I wrote it down twice.
Yeah, we already talked about this
and in
for a
all
second.
caps.
I think
But
this
we're
is
gonna
the-
say it again because it's the number one.
Yeah,
You gonna
it's the
say it?
number
Should we
one.
say it together?
No, you can take it.
Eat enough.
Yeah.
Eat enough.
Always.
Eat enough. That's just like whenever I see athletes stuck in cycles of injury, so many times it's because there's a challenge of low energy availability or maybe even a history of low energy availability. And you have to eat enough to support your training. And I think this is particularly important for female identifying athletes. There's a lot of science that shows that even 200 to 300 within day calorie deficits dramatically increase your risk for bone and stress injuries. So that's like a Cliff Bar worth of calories that you skimp on after a run, just being a little bit in the hole because you went to your kid's soccer game after the long run and you didn't stop to get your protein shake or didn't stop to get your burger or whatever your refuel is. Doing that increases your risk of injury. You have to take that stuff so seriously. It is not worth it.
It's not worth it. I think it's better to err on the side of too much than to be on the side of not enough. It's just, I mean, God, there's so many reasons. When we talk about performance too, and so when we look at injury prevention, we know, like we literally know, if you're not eating enough, you're likely going to get injured.
Yeah, and I think people always want to find out if there's some secret way that you can lose weight while getting ready for a race and running healthy and injury-free, and that's just not a thing. You cannot adapt at the same rate while you're restricting calories. You cannot run healthy, you cannot prevent injury while running in a state of low energy availability. Them's the truth.
Yeah. How about sleeping enough?
Oh, sleep is huge, right? It's recovery, right? So you need fuel and you need adequate recovery, and sleeping and also stress management, making sure your stress bucket doesn't get overly full, is so important for preventing injury. So I think people always want to know, like, what can I do more of? Give me more to do. Put more on my plate to prevent injury. When in fact, oftentimes you need to do less to prevent injury. It's not about hammering some like super fancy strength and mobility routine. It's about making sure you get to bed on time. It's about making sure that you're taking care of your mental health, that you're meditating, that you're saying no to things that you need to say no to.
Well, I think we live in a culture of not enough, and as a result of that, we all think, to recover and to prevent injury, we should be doing more.
Right, like
quite often,
I'll buy the squeezy pants, but I won't, eat enough, or I won't go to bed an hour earlier.
Right, I'll buy the squeezy pants, but when I'm in my 8-week build for my 100-miler, I have to cut the grass, every Saturday. And it's just like, no, what you have to do is sit your ass on the couch and rest.
Yeah.
No, what you have to do is get to bed at 9 o'clock so you can get 8 hours of actual sleep. What you have to do is set 10 minutes aside for, deep breathing or meditation, so you can regulate your nervous system.
Yeah.
Most of us are not training in a vacuum.
Right.
So
Are you who is training in a vacuum?
professional, runners.
Yeah.
They, of course they do have life stress too, but often if running...
It's reduced as compared to think of the straight up the nurses and the parents on our team.
Right.
That's a very different stress context.
I mean, totally. Like if all you have to be aware of essentially is getting your training in and whatever that is, and then the rest of
Posting your shirtless reel.
resting is training too. That's work.
It's when the adaptations happen.
Right. So, I don't want to, trivialize professional athletics at all. But usually injury happens because of a confluence of overstress.
Yeah.
So, we're not taking into account how our life stress is impacting us on top of not doing enough prehab, on top of not eating enough or chronically being underslept, running too hard, not running easy enough, like all of these other things, and collectively they overstress your system. The stress that you're trying and hopefully is helping you grow is becoming unproductive, and it's breaking your system down, and eventually you get to a breaking point. Your body says this is enough. So we really do need to make sure that, like, when we look at this, we say, like, consistency, prehab, strength and mobility, eat enough, sleep enough, like, that it's not like, what do I need to add here?
Right.
Because, like, honestly, like, the culture says adding is good, adding is the right thing. But likely, if we really want to prevent injury, we probably need to take some things away.
Yeah.
Or look really mindfully at our kind of habits and routines and say, what is actually supporting? Are my actions in alignment with the outcomes I want to create? That's really important to think about. For example, next on this list is, to prevent injury, we have to run truly easy on our easy days.
A lot of times I'll see athletes get stuck in a cycle of running too hard, so they get injured, so they have to take time off, so they come back and they run too hard to compensate for all the time that they took off. And the best thing to do is to make sure that you're really intentional about the effort levels that you're accessing and training. Easy days should be easy so that we can actually zoom hard on our workout days and our hard days, but you can't run every day hard. That leads to, breakdown of both the soft tissue and bone tissue. Actually, after every run, you get micro tears in your tissue, and if you're running too hard, those tears are bigger and you don't give them time to recover. And your bones actually get like little micro fissures in them after runs, so that's why you really need to take that time and space after runs to allow those tissues to adapt. And if you're running at an inappropriate effort level, the impact is going to be higher, so the degradation of those tissues is going to be more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, a good litmus test for whether you're ready to take on your first 100-miler or not is whether or not you can honestly look at consistency, prehab, strength, mobility, eating enough, sleeping enough, and being very good at running easy while also knowing how to run with intensity at purposeful and important moments in your training. If you can knock all of those out and say, I am in full control of these, then you're ready to do the 100, to start training for the 100.
I think that's so true. So often I'll have athletes ask, am I ready? Like, how do I know when I'm ready to run a 100-miler?